Joining me now from the other side of the aisle, Missouri Republican Senator Roy Blunt, Vice Chair of the Senate Republican Conference. Senator Blunt, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Chuck.
Well, I want to ask, you heard Senator Merkley there, and the statistics, numbers don't lie here, Senator Blunt. There was absolutely an escalation in the number of presidential appointees, President Obama's appointees that were held up to filibuster standards than what President Bush experienced and what President Clinton experienced. This escalation had gotten out of hand, did it not?
Well, I don't think so. You know, numbers don't lie, but they can certainly be misleading. And some of these numbers are.
That's a lot.
Well, we have. I think we've rejected 2 judges and approved 212 Obama judges.
This is not about rejection, though. This is about subject to the filibuster level of voting.
It's really not, Chuck. It's really not about that. It's about whether a person gets 60 votes or 51 votes. Just like the so-called filibuster on Secretary Hagel. Frankly, I didn't vote for Secretary Hagel, but I think he is a stronger Secretary of Defense because some Republicans did have to vote for him. This is not something that drags things on needlessly. It is a standard that the Democrats set. We all know that. The truth is, while you've got an audience that's probably really riveted on this, I think most people aren't going to pay very much attention to this, and the average guy would have turned off long ago. So, you know, they decided to change the rules. I suspect that changes the Senate in fundamental ways forever. The Senate in our system was the example to the world that there was a way in a democracy to protect minority rights. To a great extent, that's now lost on these nominations. It could very well be lost if Senator Merkley gets his way on legislation as well. And when one side decides they're going to do whatever they want to do all by themselves, there is a usual long-term price to pay. And
there's always a retaliation. Right.
There is that, but there's also, you have to defend that all by yourself. You know, the Democrats on the president's health care plan decided they weren't going to do whatever was necessary to get one single Republican in the House or the Senate to be for that. And that made the whole discussion from that moment on different than it would have been if they'd have worked to get one single Republican or 30 Republicans. And for 8 years, I was either the chief deputy whip or the whip in the House. And in that 8 years, there were only 2 bills in 8 years that some Democrats didn't vote for them. And one is we had little majorities, but 2 is we tried to look for ways that let this be something that everybody had to have some skin in the game, and it mattered whenever those things became law.
Well, let me ask you, since you have that experience, and we're going to hear a lot of commentators write about this weekend, that the Senate is now like the House, and that's not a compliment. What say you, since you've served in both bodies?
Well, the Senate has become too much like the House, and on legislative matters, it's already become the House with a one-person rules committee. You know, in the House, there's a committee that every bill goes to that decides how that bill's going to look on the floor. In the Senate, only one person can bring a bill to the floor, the majority leader, Senator Reid, and now only one person decides what's going to happen on the floor with that bill. You know, another thing that happened this week, we walked away from the defense authorizing bill, a bill that for 50 years has had virtually any amendment that any senator wanted to make. Suddenly we can't do that anymore because the majority leader says, no, I don't want to vote on an Iran resolution. I don't want to vote on this. I don't want my members to have to vote on this. So I'm the one-person rules committee, and that is not the way the Senate should work, nor the way that our system serves as an example to the world of how democracy can work with minorities still being respected.
Very quickly, the power of special interest groups. Do you think it's bad that a no vote was not treated like a no vote anymore, that you could vote no on somebody, but if you didn't participate in the filibuster, you were punished by a special interest group? Is that made things a little out of whack, too?
I'm not sure I fully understand what the example there would be.
Meaning, if you vote to not continue a filibuster, but you vote no on something anyway, that was not treated very well by the special interest group. Punish you, even though you voted against a nominee, you allowed it to have a vote on the floor of the Senate.
Well, I think there was some of that, and I think there's been a lot of deference toward the idea that these nominees should get a vote, but usually that's been tied to something else, another bill that Senator Reid wouldn't bring to the floor, an amendment that wasn't allowed. These were rights that senators in the minority had, and you often use them in ways that, frankly, tried to let the legislative process work fairly instead of focus on this nominee. Most of these nominees have never been brought to the floor. That's why they weren't confirmed.
All right. Senator Roy Blunt, Republican from Missouri. Thank you, sir.